Chapter 12. Tension. Lunar date 3.1625.4.25. 7 hours and 24 minutes after dayrise. Fiddling with strands of her purple hair, Abigail went over the setup for the presentation one more time. Daniel was supposed to be here by now. She had spent most of her lunch period poring over her part of the project and ensuring all the videos and displays were set up correctly in the classroom. She sent a message to Daniel earlier, asking if he could help. He said he would, but he wasn't anywhere to be seen and the class was beginning in 6 minutes. Abigail had heard about what happened at the prep tournament. By now, who hadn't? Dorn went to cheer on the Red Eagles. He had invited her to go with him, but she declined. She had spent the day relaxing in her room until her Nexus started to blow up with messages from Shyloe and Dorn late in the afternoon. "Did you see what just happened at the prep tournament?" Shyloe had messaged. Dorn wasn't any less cryptic, though it did provide a little more information. "I don't think Daniel's as honorable as you imagine he is." Abigail hadn't told him about her fight with Daniel. She didn't want Dorn to feel like he had somehow gained the upper hand. Instead of responding, she jumped on the hub. Didn't take her long to see. Everyone was posting videos of the incident. Some called Daniel a hero, while others referred to him as a hypocrite since they knew about his beliefs in Arnion. The hub had its benefits, but there were times it seemed to represent the worst in their humanity. This was on display as everyone was debating over Daniel's actions and giving their opinion. To appease her distorted curiosity, she watched the video over and over. At first she thought it was some sort of trick. There was no way Daniel would do what the person did in the video. Part of her wanted to argue with those attacking Daniel's character, while at the same time, part of her wanted to call out those who were championing his actions. Yet, there he was, kissing Nolan Actor's girlfriend with no remorse. It was clear something was different about him. It was in his eyes. Instead of the caring, warm blue eyes she admired, they were cold and disconnected, almost as if someone was in control of his body. According to the hub, Nolan's girlfriend was Comey Hudson. Another video featured her talking about the kiss. She didn't seem too fazed by it. In fact, she said she enjoyed it. Even joked about finding Daniel later and revisiting their connection. I'm sure that made Nolan happy. That was enough for Abigail. After disconnecting from the hub, she had left her dorm room. Trying to clear her mind, she had taken a long walk through town. It didn't help. She still wasn't sure why Daniel's actions bugged her so much. They weren't friends anymore. She wasn't even supposed to have him in her life. Yet the change in his demeanor bothered her. What has changed with him? Was it our fight? Am I to blame for this? The Daniel from a month ago would have been in the classroom helping her prep for the project. He would have followed through with his word. With 30 seconds to spare, Daniel finally walked into the room. "I thought you were going to be here earlier." Her voice displayed her level of stress. Daniel shrugged. "I got distracted. I'm here now. No need to be concerned. I'm sure we both know what we're going to say." Something is seriously wrong with him. Not wanting to ask him, Abigail heard the words come out of her mouth before she could stop them. What possibly could have distracted you from coming to help set up? It was clear to her he wasn't himself. This project is worth a majority of our grade. I thought that was important to you. She made sure to look him in the eyes. "I was talking with some girls in the cafeteria," Daniel replied with a casual shrug. "Apparently they want to hang out this weekend, so we're spending some time getting to know one another." Abigail eyed him suspiciously. Their classmates were beginning to find their seats. "You were late because you were talking with girls?" "Well, we weren't just talking," he smiled. "Whatever," Abigail scoffed. "I don't care." "Yeah, you've made that inexplicably clear." She stopped herself from responding. "Let's just get this over with, all right?" "I couldn't agree more." Abigail and Daniel stood at the center of the class as Professor Michaels welcomed everyone. As she did with every presentation, she dressed up as the historical person being discussed. She wore a wig of orange hair with a long braid down her back, and her clothes were reminiscent of the typical bounty hunter garb Tilani wore. Abigail always appreciated Professor Michaels' extravagant love for history. "We want to begin today by asking you all a question," Daniel started, looking out at his classmates. "I have set up a poll to be sent to all of your Nexi, and we want you to pick one of the answers. The question is this. In a relationship, would you choose love or power?" He held up a hand as a sign of caution. Don't worry, this is anonymous, though I'm fairly certain I know how some of you will answer. Only Abigail knew that comment was directed towards her. Of the 26 people in the class, 23 students chose power over love. Abigail was one of the 3 who chose love, not because of any grand revelation. She simply wanted Daniel to be wrong about her. That still left 2 others. Did Daniel choose it as well? I know he used to believe in love over power, but I'm not so certain anymore. Honestly, not surprised by the results, Daniel continued. Our current world holds prestige and power as the ultimate goal. The tension between love or power is not a new debate. It existed over 1600 years ago during the waning days of the Age of Drakon. Tilani Arusa, bounty hunter and revolutionary, wrestled with this decision, and our belief is that her entire life prepared her for the choice she made, which led to the fall of the Drakon Empire and the rise of the Age of Progress. An image of Wilbur Artanik's lunar armor floated as Abigail took over from Daniel. A couple years ago, I discovered I am a descendant of Wilbur Artanik and Tilani Arusa. Most of us know that Wilbur's armor, as seen behind me, is on display at the National Museum in Morinth. What you may not know is that the museum allows people to try on the armor to see if it will activate. A video of a younger Abigail started to play. The black armor started to hum and blue lights indicated its activation. Her parents celebrated with her. She caught herself wishing for those moments to return, when life appeared to be simpler. Lunar armor was specifically crafted by the rebel army to match the DNA of the armor's owner. To ensure the armor wasn't wasted, it was also designed to work with any descendant from the original DNA. Both of them had fully memorized their speeches and when to begin and end to allow full engagement with their classmates. Unfortunately, Wilbur's armor is one of those few left intact all over the world. As a future archaeologist, it is my desire to hopefully find some more to add to the collection, she smiled. Abigail shared what they learned about Tilani's early life and her recruitment as a bounty hunter. Scenes from the Solar Deck documentary played in the background. Daniel took over at the part of the story about Ritza Turdip and her capture. Ritza planted the initial seeds of doubt inside the mind of Tilani. Daniel pointed to the scene behind him. Despite this, she still delivered Ritza to the Drakon Empire and Imperator Areyx. He imprisoned her at Amenbar, not wishing to kill her and make her a martyr. Pallador, Ritza's mentor, did not give up her search, and she discovered a young Wilbur Artanik who would become the voice and face of the rebellion against the Empire. Thus the board was set, and all the pieces were in place as Palmara prepared for revolution. Daniel paused for dramatic effect. Now, due to Tilani's success in capturing Ritza, Imperator Areyx began to hire her for more and more jobs. Eventually, the 2 of them became lovers. Abigail half expected Daniel to choke on that word, but he continued as if nothing ever happened. According to one of Tilani's journals, and this has been confirmed by other historians, Areyx proposed to her in private on lunar date 2.2162.10.11. She accepted. However, does anyone know the significance of this date? Ritza was the first to raise her hand. Abigail acknowledged her with a nod. That is the day before Wilbur Artanik gave his famous speech in the arcade of the Drakon Empire. Correct, Abigail responded with a slight smile. The arcade was the grand chamber in Amenbar where all the councils, who were the representatives of the people, met to discuss politics, strategy, and all the details of running the empire. In his speech, Wilbur called for Imperator Areyx to openly repent for his family's heritage of evil. If he didn't, then a new way of governance should be approved by the members of the arcade. The Imperator wasn't confident in the arcade to vote in his favor. With the threat of rebellion on the horizon, Imperator Areyx devised a plan to capture Pallador and Wilbur quietly. In his fear, he dispatched Tilani to do his dirty work, and a cover story was concocted to explain their lawful capture. Daniel took over the presentation for the next part. Scenes of Tilani, Wilbur, and Pallador played on the holographic display. He spoke with an energetic confidence that came from a heart devoted to teaching. Forewarned by other members of the arcade, Wilbur and Pallador fled the capital city. Tilani pursued them, but lost their trail at sea during a winter squall. Not wanting to have a blemish on her record, Tilani hunted for any sign of Wilbur. Eventually, she found his base in the mountains of Morosia, about 200 kilometers south of here. Unfortunately, members of the army were joining his ranks and she was unable to infiltrate safely. She returned to Areyx with the information only to find out that Morosia had been overthrown by the rebels and cut their ties with the Empire. The war was beginning, and the proposed marriage was put on hold. On lunar date 2.2164.8.2, Cladonia was liberated by Wilbur's rebel army, now called the Shadow Knights. In anger, Imperator Areyx demanded the surrender of Wilbur's army, or he was going to publicly execute Ritza Turdep. Since her capture, Tilani had visited Ritza in prison many times, learning how to sign so they could speak to one another. Despite their differences, Tilani began to consider Ritza a friend. When she heard of Areyx's announcement, she tried to persuade the Imperator not to kill Ritza. A tone of sadness entered Daniel's voice. Tilani's request fell on deaf ears. When Wilbur and the Shadow Knights did not surrender, Areyx followed through on his threat. Ritza Turdep was ordered to be killed by the Empire's favored form of execution, the Tears of Justice. This device, first used by Drakon himself, featured a person tied to a stake in an empty glass container. Water filled up halfway and then was heated from underneath. By the time it reached their necks, it was starting to boil, and they died due to overheating while everyone watched, in horror. Daniel couldn't hide the dread in his words. An image of the device appeared on the holographic display. The name, Tears of Justice, was used as a way for the Empire to explain that they didn't want to execute the person. Rather, it was needed to protect the sanctity of the Empire. Thus, they were killed by the metaphoric tears of their captors. Daniel paused. It was a ploy to persuade the crowd to abide by the Empire's law, and for thousands of years, it worked. Once again, the hologram shifted, this time showing the two women talking to each other. Daniel motioned to them with his right hand. The night before the execution, Tilani stayed with Ritza. They signed, they laughed, and they cried together. The hologram changed to show the events of the execution. Before being placed in the Tears of Justice, Ritza's final words were signed to Areyx and interpreted by Tilani. Instead of quoting it, we believe this solar deck recreation creates the correct atmosphere for her final words. Silence filled the room as all of them turned their gaze to the holographic images. The scene on the Nexus displayed Ritza standing in the glass container, signing before being tied to the metal pole behind her. Areyx sat on his throne with a smug arrogance, while Tilani stood beside him interpreting the final words of her friend. You threaten me with a water which boils only for minutes. You are ignorant of the coming flood that will drown your empire. By the grace of Arnion, I shall enter into the eternal city of Valnios, and you will spend eternity in the endless desert where no water will quench your undying thirst. But why do you tarry? Bring forth what you will. I am ready. This was Abigail's cue to pick up where Daniel left off. Even though she knew what Ritza was going to say, the words inspired her to continue strong with her presentation, though her next words were spoken with a somber tone. Tilani never once took her eyes off her friend until the gift of life faded from Ritza's eyes. It is said, though highly debated by historians, that Ritza never reacted to the heat of the water. Instead, she kept her eyes staring upwards in defiance of Areyx and the Drakon Empire. Abigail caught herself as the emotion of the moment started to make the words catch in her throat. She took a deep breath and reclaimed her composure. As we can imagine, Ritza's words in defiance stayed with Tilani. Unfortunately, she was unable to grieve for her friend as Areyx dispatched her with a new mission: find and capture Wilbur Artanikst. She was not to return until she had him in chains. Her journal tells us of the internal struggles she wrestled with while on this mission. On lunar date 2.2165.1.19, she wrote the following: How can I marry the man that ordered the death of one of my closest friends? I once thought the world Ritza believed in was a fairy tale. Yet Wilbur and his Shadow Knights are making her dream a reality. Areyx is scared. It is why he ordered her execution. He wanted to prove he still had control, and for some, it worked. For some, it did not. Many more are joining the rebels daily, and I don't know where I stand. Not yet. I'm not used to second-guessing myself. I'm a bounty hunter. I do my job, and I do it well. Wilbur is only another target I must bring in. At the same time, I sense that if I succeed in this mission, I will destroy the dream of Ritza once and for all. How can I determine the future of the world? Am I supposed to stop the flood? Or ensure it happens? Abigale let those words permeate in the room before continuing. After months of trailing and hunting Wilbur, she finally captured him on the 5th day during the month of Thardan. Their ship was wrecked during a storm on their way back to Admin Bar. All hands were lost except for Tilani and Wilbur. In fact, it was Wilbur who saved Tilani from certain death. They floated on driftwood for nearly a day before washing up on the shore of a deserted island. For nearly 22 days they survived off of fresh water, fruit, and fish. During this time, Tilani and Wilbur grew closer to one another, and the seeds of their love began to bud, though neither spoke about it. I should have remained silent too, Daniel mumbled under his breath. No one besides Abigale heard him. She chose to ignore him, at least for now. On the 22nd day, a ship from the Drakon Empire saw their smoke signals and rescued them. Despite her feelings, Tilani escorted Wilbur back to Admin Bar in chains. Areyx was pleased beyond measure and scheduled Wilbur's execution for 2.2165.8.25. Abigale paused. An exact year after the execution of Ritza Turdep. Everything in Tilani's life up to this point prepared her for the crossroads. Without Ritza, Tilani may not have made the decision she did. Without being a bounty hunter, she may not have been in the position she was in to make a difference. Without being close to Areyx, she may not have been chosen to... I am sorry to interrupt you, Abigale, the voice of her Candy spoke over the classroom's nexus. I have an important news announcement that must be shared with the rest of the class. All other Nexi in the classroom are disabled until the announcement is over. Professor Michaels, do I have your permission to proceed? By all means, Candy. Apprehension and concern were present in the professor's voice. As far as Abigale could recall, she never experienced anything like this before. Very well. The images of their project disappeared to be replaced by a female reporter standing outside with the city landscape behind her. Abigale recognized the architecture as belonging to Huxtriel, the capital of Cladonia. It is with our deepest sympathies that we must announce the death of Chancellor Natalie Allen. Abigale's heart nearly stopped in her chest. She covered her mouth as an audible gasp escaped her lips, and hers wasn't the only one in the classroom. Reports have confirmed that the Chancellor was eating a meal with some colleagues at the local Blades restaurant located at Belinta Tower. The images showed the fire and smoke of a large tower billowing up towards the sky. A Starjet returning to the airfield had a malfunction in their portside engine, spiraled out of control, and descended into the city skyline. It crashed into the restaurant, killing the Chancellor and 32 others. It is unknown at this time who was flying the Starjet, and if there were any passengers on board. We know this is a shock for everyone, so we ask for your patience as we maneuver through the reports of this horrific accident. Candy's voice silenced the reporter and spoke. Professor Michaels, Headmaster Wexley is requesting all staff and students to make their way to the Dominika Baldwin Center for an assembly where she can address the entire student body and give direction. Thank you, Candy. This is terrible news. Please, class, pack up your things. The professor beckoned both Daniel and Abigale to come over. They obliged, though Abigale felt like she was in a daze. Since tomorrow is the final day of classes for the semester, I believe Headmaster Wexley will dismiss the students today with the news of Chancellor Allen's death. I know you haven't finished your presentation, but you both have done an excellent job so far. You will get full marks from me, and I will inform the rest of the class to grade you on what you presented so far. Both genuinely thanked the professor and grabbed their belongings before heading towards the center. As she walked, Abigale tried to make sense of everything. She couldn't believe Natalie was dead. Death was a natural part of life, and while understanding that in her mind, it never quite became a realization in her heart until it was someone she knew personally. It was easy to move on with life when the people dying were unknown. I met Natalie, though, nearly a month ago. She is a real person, not just someone who exists outside my circle. I wonder how Dorn is holding up. I should call him. Attempting to reach Dorn, there was no answer. Her mind started to run rampant with anxious thoughts. Was he in Cladonia? What if he went to visit Natalie and was eating with her? Is that why he wasn't answering? Why do I care so much? Does this mean I actually care for him, or am I just afraid of how my parents will react? They can't be upset with me if he is dead, can they? When she was outside and heading towards the center, she tried calling Dorn again. Still, no answer. Guess Dorn doesn't drop everything when he sees you calling, Daniel scoffed, walking past her. A lesson I should have learned earlier than I did. Abigale stopped and glared at Daniel. Shut up! Don't act all high and mighty. You've lost any right to share your opinion with me. Her voice was shaky. She was on the verge of losing her composure as her emotions were catching up. Let's not play games, Abigale. Daniel turned to face her. His voice had lost the passion of the teacher and was replaced with coldness that matched his eyes. Other students and professors walked by them, more focused on getting to the center than eavesdropping on their conversation. You never respected my point of view anyways. I was just there as a distraction. I didn't matter to you. She wanted to correct him and tell him that there was a time where he did matter to her, but no longer. Just go away, Daniel. I have enough going on right now. I don't need your arrogance added to it. Whatever. Daniel shook his head. I came over to say I was sorry about Chancellor Allen since I knew you had met her when you were in Huxriel. But I guess I should have just stayed silent. Oh no, Abigale held up her hand. You don't get to come over here and act like you care when you've been a real douchebag over the past month. He eyed her coldly. Douchebag? If that's what you think I am, just remember it's you who made me this way. He started to walk away. Don't blame me for your choices, Daniel, she shouted. A few heads turned in their direction, but no one stopped. Daniel whipped around. You know, I thought you might like the new me. Seems to fit in with how you like your men. Cold, uncaring, arrogant. Need I go on? Before she could respond, her nexus started to beep. Dorn was returning her call. Relief came over her. Not out of love, rather due to the uncertainty of knowing her prestige was still secure. You better answer that. You don't want to leave Dorn out high and dry, even though he'd have no problem doing it to you. Enjoy your life of prestige, Abigale. I've had a taste of it over the past few weeks. It's better than I gave it credit for. Maybe I should be thanking you for opening up my eyes. Abigale watched him continue on towards the center. Her nexus was still beeping. She should answer. Instead, she collapsed to the ground and started to cry. Thank you for listening to my book, Palmara, A Dying Breed. I'd love to hear your feedback. What do you like? What do you think needs some work? What are you most interested to see happen? What questions do you have? At the end of every chapter, I'll have these slides that show how time works in Palmara, plus the different sayings and terms to help you engage with the world. As well, the characters who appear in each chapter will be found in the video description. Be sure to check it out. And if you're enjoying this and enjoy other stories, please make sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe. You can always join the Discord with the link in the description as well. Until next time, Hanei Akmatov, which means how pleasant it is for humanity to dwell in harmony with one another. Take care.